Okay, welcome to session 10.1. Let's see, it's now been a week, um, or actually 6 days since my surgery on my wrist. Still got a stent on it, and you can kind of see the black eye hasn't quite gone away, but I'm mending very well, and actually my wrist feels very good, and I think I can write all I want. Um, First thing I'm going to do in this, you have on Dropbox a file labeled something like 10 dot Signorino gossip. Okay. So what's in this file is first a copy of an article from the Chronicle of Higher Education. I think this is something like 1997, 98. I should have looked that up. Late 90s. And it was about Kurt Signorino, who was a very remarkable grad student at Harvard, and actually like a really smart guy, but almost fell through the cracks. Almost didn't even get accepted into the poli sci department at Harvard. Um, but was and eventually started working with some professors there, mainly probably Gary King, who's a kind of statistician and within political science, and also Ken Shepsley. Um, as I give this lecture, this is at George Mason, and most of us, or I consider myself part of the public choice group. Um, Now, there's kind of a counter group called the Rochester Political Science Group, and they're very similar. And actually, I'm not even sure if I know I've mentioned it before to class. I'm not sure in these lectures. I kind of liken it to within. It's like sometime around the early 60s, late 1950s. There's kind of a niche, a market niche that someone needs to fill, and this is to use economic tools to study politics questions. And some of the people who did this were the public choice people, James Buchanan, Gordon Tullock. But at the same time, there's another group, the Rochester School of Political Science. These were political scientists who kind of learned some economics tools. And I kind of liken this to a case like how bats and birds are. They came from totally different evolutionary trees. Bats are mammals. Um, Meanwhile, the birds came from reptiles. They're very different. I'm sure their DNA is very, very different. But they kind of look the same. They both fly around, and something similar happened with Rochester political science and public choice economics. And meanwhile, here I am. I'm in the public choice school, but I kind of came from the Rochester political science school. My advisor is Keith Crable, who got his PhD from Rochester. His advisor was Richard Fenno, and some will say Richard Fenno and William Riker were the founders of what we call the Rochester School. Anyway, the final punchline is sort of a joke that I'm like the I'm like the bat living among birds. So I was raised by the Rochester School, and now here I am at Public Choice. So anyway, Kurt Signorino, though, he's from so he went to Harvard, but Ken Shepsley was one of his was on his dissertation committee, and Ken Shepsley is definitely part of the Rochester School. And at some point, Kurt had a really good paper, and I think Ken Shepsley made a phone call or two, realized, oh man, this was an opportunity. Ken Shepsley loves the Rochester School, and I think he wanted to. This wasn't like an advisor trying to help his own student. This was actually the opposite. This was Ken Shepsley as an alum of the Rochester School thinking, oh, I can help my old grad school department. I see this great talent, and we can act early, and maybe Rochester can hire him, and that's what happened. Um, so uh, Kurt was this star student at Harvard, And I remember, so you'll read that article. You'll read the um, uh, Chronicle of Higher Education article. And it talks about he gave a talk at a meeting of political scientists. Well, it turns out that meeting was the methodology meeting of political scientists. Now, I kind of do that. I never go to the meetings except for one time, and that was the time they had it in Columbus, Ohio. I was teaching at Ohio State, and they had the meetings there, so I went, and I remember seeing Kurt's seminar. I'd never met him before, didn't know who this guy was. I think he was still a grad student, and so I kind of knew, like, oh, okay, here's this rising star, and I remember. Um, I couldn't quite follow. Maybe I was daydreaming or something, but I couldn't quite follow his seminar. But I remember everyone being impressed with this. This was like a combination of some game theory and mixed it in with some uh, complex statistical methods. I remember that's what everyone was thinking. And I also remember that everyone was extremely impressed with Figure 3. That's the thing that got him his job. I think that made him a star on the market. This Figure 3. So that's where I'm going. That's the goal, is for you to understand what's going on in Figure 3, and where we're going is you see these wavy lines, the full lines. That's like the truth, and then that dotted line is like what we normally do in estimation. That's like the estimation of the truth, and it's way off from the truth. You can see that. So that is where we're going. All right. So you have that article. I want you to read that. So I call it gossip, but this is good gossip. This is some compliments about Kurt Signorino, and I want all of you grad students to know about this. And then I emailed Kurt, and so I'm almost certain that I met him at the meetings. I think I went up and introduced myself, and Dark Red, I think, became friends. I think it was at those meetings, and so uh, kind of recently, I emailed him and asked him, just, hey, Kurt, how'd you're using the McKelvey-Palfrey QRE model. How'd you even know about this? So this was like, I think when he wrote his paper. Let's see, so I'm looking at I don't even have the date. This was like 97 or 98. I'm not sure. It was eventually published in American Political Science Review. And then I'm trying to think when McKelvey-Palfrey, I think that was like mid-90s when their paper came out. And so I asked Kurt, how'd you even know about that paper? And as you see, he wrote, and he said, well, what had happened is that McKelvey-Palfrey had sent a copy to Gary King, who was Kurt's advisor. And this is the mid-90s. You should know something about the time. This is before internet, or we actually used it that much. Before we knew how to create a PDF file and send it by email. What we used to do is at some point you'd write a paper, you get a rough draft off, you might show it to a colleague or two, and then eventually, once it was like pretty polished, what you do is go to the copier and make 10 to 50 copies of the paper, and then you'd send it out in a little manila envelope to a list of people, and it'd be on this list, and you just put a little note in there, comments welcome, something like that, or if you have time, please send it to me. And so this is what we did before the internet. And I remember thinking it's always an accomplishment when you got a paper, when it's polished enough that you're willing to send it out to people, and you think, okay, now people might start citing it. And then usually what you do is you do that and wait a little bit, see if you get some comments, and then whether you do or not, maybe a month or two or so later, you'd send it out to journals. Okay. So that's what had happened. And McKelvey and Palfrey had gone through this routine. They sent it out to, I don't know, probably 50 people, something like that. And one on their list was Gary King. And, usually when you get these papers, I don't have time to read this. But meanwhile, you're kind of flattered that you're on these people's list to think, oh, okay, they think I'm an important person who should read this. And, but I'll admit it, usually you just throw it away. You didn't have time to read it. But Kurt Signorino had been talking to Gary King, something about using, he thought a lot of these statistical methods weren't using what's actually in the game theory, weren't using the full implications of the game theory in their estimation. And so Gary King kind of knew about this, saw the title of the paper, as Kurt said, it had something like estimation and game theory in the title or abstract. And so Gary just said, Kurt, maybe you want to read these. And so that's what happened. So Kurt Signorino read it. And as he said, he couldn't quite understand it at first. Hopefully, as you guys are saying, but, eventually he came to understand it. And wrote his paper about that. Okay, so I wanted you to see the backstory behind that, how Kurt came to write this paper. One final thing, while I'm thinking about it, this notion about when your paper's polished enough that you send it off to people. I wanted to take this opportunity to give a little bit more career advice to my grad students. So I already kind of did this once. I talked about Jim Paterba's notion about finding an instrument. So, by the way, this course really has nothing to do with the instrumental variables or trying to solve endogeneity problems. This course is very different. But I did give a little talk about that very topic, about 5 minutes on that topic. And remember, the key was Jim Paterba's advice. If you want to find an instrument, you want to find a natural experiment, you find the instrument first, and then you find the problem that it solves. That is the key thing. So I think that is one really, really important piece of advice for a grad student thinking about his or her career in academia. The second thing I wanted to tell you, a little bit of advice. When you send these papers off to journals, there is a huge random component to it, especially in political science, probably a little less in economics, but there still is in economics. The editor sends it off to reviewers, and it's crapshoot. You could get a reviewer who likes your stuff, a reviewer who has a grudge against you. Okay, it is crapshoot. And I have felt, even in my career, that even when I had like a paper that I thought my best work ever, I found that even that, at best, it has a 1/3 chance. And I've published in some of these top journals, but even when that happened, when I had a paper I thought was like my best paper ever, I'd say that the chances that it was going to get accepted was at best 1/3, and probably more like 15 or 20%. And so the key is you've got to, even when you have a great paper, you got to send it off lots of times. Okay. First thing, remember this when you're going up for tenure. So when you're at 6-year mark of your first job, and these journals, even the quickest turnarounds are something like 6 months, and sometimes it takes a year or 18 months. And so if you want to be able to try 2 or 3 or 4 times at the top journals, you got to start sending it off, something like 3 years before you go up for tenure. You got to start early. Okay, so that's point one. The second point is don't take it personal when you get these rejections. And the key is you just got to send it off again. Send it lots of times. You got to try lots and lots of times. So you'll get comments from a journal. You don't always have to incorporate those, and don't let that slow you down. If you get rejected from a journal, you get some comments, sometimes it's best just to ignore them. Put the send the paper off to another journal that very same day. It's so important that when I was teaching at UCLA, now I had tenure when I was there, and at some point I would go up to all the new assistant professors and tell them, like, look, when you're up for your 4th year review, so that's your review, kind of give you some feedback before you go up for tenure in another 2 or 3 years. And I said, for your 4th year review, and we had to give them like satisfactory, unsatisfactory, or very good. It was like one of these 3 categories you had to vote on. And I would tell them, look, to get the top category for me, the very good, I'm not going to judge you by how many publications you have. All I'm going to judge you on is how many times you tried to publish at one of the, say, top 5 journals. And so, and I told them, I said that the magic number is 12. So when you're up for your 4th year review, I'm going to ask you, how many times have you sent a paper to one of the top 5 journals? And if you say at least 12, I will give you, even if you have 0 publications, if you've tried at least 12 times, I'm going to give you that top category. I think it was just very good. That was the top you could get. Meanwhile, if you haven't, and you had like 6 publications at Great Play, but he hadn't tried 12 times, I'm not going to give you. I said, the key is the attempts with me. And so, and told him that advice: if you get rejected, don't take it personal. And also the other thing, when you write a paper, don't try not to celebrate when you get published. It's almost like a lottery. There's so much randomness in that. The key time to celebrate is when you've sent something off. So when you've gotten one. And so I would tell these assistant professors that look, just if you get rejected, send it off, send it to another. If you get rejected at a top 5 journal, and then you send it off again that day, that's 2 attempts. That's your 2nd attempt that day. And it got around, and they started taking it to heart so much that Leslie Johns invented this term when she'd go around and tell the other assistant professors. Sometimes she would say, "Oh, I got a Tim point today," and what she meant was that I got rejected from a top 5 journal, but I sent it out again to another journal. And so keep that in mind. And I would tell them also, you need 12 Tim points, and I would count the times that you tried it as a grad student. So you guys are grad students pretty soon. Key is get a paper finished, send it out to the top place, okay? You get a Tim point, okay? Start building up those. Try to get 12 before you're up for your 4th year review once you're an assistant professor. Okay, so those are my tips, gossip about Kurt Signorino. Okay, so next I'll start talking about his paper. Okay, see you there.